Paris once claimed the authority to legislate elegance for the entire world. Not metaphorically, literally. In the 19th century, writers described Paris as promulgating fashion laws for nations beyond its borders. This was not flattery. It was jurisdiction. France did not become the fashion capital by accident. It did not happen because Parisians were simply more stylish. It happened because fashion was engineered, first as power, then as taste, and finally as export. This is the system. Court power becomes taste authority. Taste authority becomes global fashion. And once this system is in place, it sustains itself for centuries. Before fashion belonged to designers or magazines or cities, it belonged to courts. Courts were not just residences. They were theatres of hierarchy. What was worn at court mattered because court was where rank was made visible. Clothing was not personal expression. It was political language. To appear correctly dressed was to show obedience. To appear incorrectly dressed was to risk exclusion. This is why courts become the first fashion engines. In France, this logic reaches its most refined and deliberate form under Louis XIV. Louis XIV does not simply rule France. He stages France. He draws the nobility to Versailles and keeps them there, not through force, but through ritual, ceremony, etiquette, spectacle. Dress becomes mandatory performance. Every ribbon, every heel height, every hairstyle becomes a sign of proximity to power. And crucially, Louis XIV understands something earlier rulers only hinted at. Luxury is a tool of control. If nobles are busy competing in elegance, they are not competing for sovereignty. So fashion becomes continuous, never finished, never settled. Under his reign, France does not just wear fashion, it organizes it. Guilds form around specific objects. Fans, for example, are no longer casual accessories. They become regulated products made by specialized artisans under royal authority. Manufactures are encouraged. Privileges are granted. Production is centralized. Luxury becomes industry. Court power does not merely inspire fashion. It funds, regulates, and stabilizes it. This is the first transformation. Fashion moves from habit to system. Power alone does not make a fashion capital. Power must be translated into taste. And this translation happens in Paris. Paris becomes something new, a city where judgment matters, not just wealth, but discernment. Writers describe Parisian taste as inventive, restless, and exacting. Fashion there is not frozen by tradition. It changes deliberately, and importantly, this taste does not stay confined to the palace. It spills into the street. An English observer, Francis Trollope, notes that elegance appears everywhere in Paris, not just in salons, but in shop windows, market displays, and ordinary gestures. Taste becomes public culture. Paris does not merely wear fashion. Paris watches fashion. This is critical, because once fashion is observed, it can be evaluated. Once it is evaluated, it can be ranked. Once it is ranked, it can be taught. This is where fashion media enters. France begins publishing fashion plates, illustrated records of what is worn, where, and by whom. Later, fashion journals appear at regular intervals, documenting styles seen in promenades, theatres, and public gardens. This does something unprecedented. Fashion becomes repeatable. You no longer need to attend court to know what is correct. You can see it printed. You can copy it. Paris becomes an authority, not because it demands obedience, but because it provides reference. This is the second transformation. Power becomes taste, and taste becomes instruction. Once taste can be taught, it can be standardized. Fashion plates do not simply describe clothing. They fix proportion. They stabilize silhouette. They reduce variation. A dressmaker no longer invents freely. She compares. A tailor no longer asks what is fashionable. He asks what matches Paris. This is the moment fashion stops depending on physical presence. It no longer requires access to court. It no longer requires proximity to power. It requires reference. When taste becomes reference, it becomes infrastructure. Infrastructure does not persuade, it standardizes. Once taste can be printed, it can be exported. French fashion does not travel primarily through people. It travels through images, descriptions, and goods. Fashion books circulate across Europe, then to the Americas. Foreign elites follow Parisian styles almost implicitly, not because they are forced to, but because Paris has become the measuring stick. French exports of fashion goods rise dramatically. Imports of comparable luxury decline. This is the final proof. France does not just influence fashion, it dominates the fashion economy. By this point, the system is complete. Court power creates spectacle. Spectacle creates taste authority. Taste authority creates exportable style. And once the world is trained to look to Paris for approval, the cycle sustains itself. This is why modern couture still speaks French. This is why collections are launched in Paris. Why silhouettes are validated there. Why fashion history keeps returning to this city. France did not just dress bodies, it dressed the world's imagination. Fashion capitals are not born, they are constructed. And France constructed its authority deliberately, through power, through taste, and through systems that could be reproduced far beyond its borders. In the next episode, we will examine how silhouette engineering, corsets, crinolines, and volume turned fashion into architecture. Because once fashion rules the eye, it must also rule the body.